All right, we are live from Olympia, Washington. I'm going to step back a bit and I'm going to step into loud hailer territory here for a minute because Alison said that I need to bring something so everyone could hear. So look, you know, what kind of revolution starts in this weird park between that road and this gravel pit? You're about to find out, but I really just want to start by saying thank you to Alison and the chiropractors and Jeff from Designs for Health for putting this on, and Gwen and everyone else. Let's have a round of applause. You know, in our actual events that we do around the country, we're doing 22 live events. Myself and my family are living in that bus for the next 4 months. The end of the tour is the first day of open enrollment, which is November 1st. And as we go through this, you're going to learn why that's a very specific date and why it's an important date for what we've been doing. So what I've learned so far from speaking to all of you is there is a very diverse group of people here. You have people that have had tremendous success with integrative and functional medicine. We have providers and doctors. We have a really interesting group of community. So I wanted to, normally at my presentations I got like a PowerPoint, and so I can sort of contextualize what we're talking about here, but I don't have that. So I'm going to start by contextualizing it through a couple of books that I want to talk about to just give you an idea of what we're really talking about here. So the first book that I want to share is called How to Make Disease Disappear. And this is a book that aligns with a TED Talk that you can watch on YouTube. It's had 1 million plus views. But I want to talk about my friend Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. He is an interesting doctor because he was picked out of 800 doctors in the UK where I was born to basically be the face of this new show called Doctor in the House. And if you can imagine it for the American audience, imagine Dr. Oz meets Super Nanny. Imagine Dr. Oz comes and lives in your house for a month and he basically does all of his magical stuff, and let's see what happens. Now, when they picked him to do this show 3 years ago, they didn't really know what they were getting. They thought they were getting a 6'7", good-looking Indian doctor, but what they actually got was a doctor who had come across to America to train in a type of medicine called functional medicine, right? And they didn't know what they were getting, but they got this, and so just so I'm clear, who has an idea of functional medicine, what it is, and what I'm talking about when I say that word? This is the Functional Forum Meetup group. Okay, there's a couple who don't. So, you know, basics is built on 3 principles. It's a different operating system for medicine, but it's designed around 1, treating the root cause of dysfunction and not targeting the symptoms. 2 is looking at chronic disease through a window of complexity. Ultimately, like looking at not separating disease into systems, but looking at how different systems interact. And then the 3rd is engaging the patient to be a participant in their care. So he did this show, and for the first time, 5 million people on live, basically like prime time English TV, saw diseases disappearing. And it started off in the first season. There were 2 cases of type 2 diabetes reversed in 30 days by dietary, lifestyle changes, all those kind of things. And then in the second season, it got really real. And instead of just doing type 2 diabetes, it was like cluster headaches and fibromyalgia and a lot of really, really tough things. And all of these diseases unwound in a period of 4 to 6 weeks to almost complete resolution based on a different operating system for medicine that engages the patient to participate, looks at a holistic view of the patient, and looks to get to the root cause. So the reason I mentioned that to start is because I want to give that as a contextualize. Now, that has not been on American TV, but that is a thing that happened, and we're recommending his book, and we have it on our tour in the merch stand because, hey Callie, over there, just for a minute. It's my daughter Calliana. She's very excited about my talk. Your ice cream is coming very soon. All right, so that's the first. The first step is that this is real, and for those people who are practicing functional medicine, you're seeing this happen in your practice as well. And it's an interesting moment in medicine because, like, on one hand, you have a ridiculous increase in type 2 diabetes, right, in America, and yet you have a company like Verta Health in Silicon Valley that is consistently reversing type 2 diabetes, not managing it, reversing it, using health coaches and using telemedicine and having a massive virtual clinic, so much so that they raised another $55 million to do it. So we have this crazy time in medicine where on one hand, you know, we have no idea how to solve this problem, and on the other hand, it's just being solved in a really elegant way in just another part of society. And if you've been in this space of integrated and functional medicine, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking about elegant solutions to chronic disease that start with the patient operating from a new story about themselves. And we were just talking a minute ago about permission, giving themselves permission to be part of the healing process and connecting with a provider who's going to empower them to participate in their care, where the patient has the answers, where the patient can participate and the doctor is like sort of, you know, guiding them towards that and using their skills to understand what the root causes are. So I was brought up in this weird world, right? When I was brought up, I had a chiropractor. Like I didn't realize that the care that I got was weird until I went to school and realized that no one knew what one of those chiropractor was. And you know, my mother, when I was 6, I was the only kid in school. This is 1986, 32 years ago. I was the only kid in school whose mum had to be contacted before they gave me antibiotics. So somehow, my mother, with no medical experience, was able to predict the downside of over antibiotic use for 30 years, by 30 years. How does that even happen? Right? That question stuck in my mind. And when I was an investment banker, a year into my career, now this is like 14 years ago in England, my first day in the job, and I realized, like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, how did my mum know this? And I had a moment where I was like, I'm playing for the wrong team. I can go and do something involved in this space. So I worked in this space for 10 years, and then 4 years ago, I started a show called the Functional Forum, where we essentially took functional medicine education and tried to make it cool. So instead of putting, you know, we had Daft Punk as the intro music, it was all for free online. And, you know, instead of putting the old doctors who had come up with this kind of, the thesis, the scientists, we put cool, young, aspirational doctors, where other doctors would be go like, oh, I want to have a practice like that, because you know what? That doctor loves their job. They love seeing patients. They love the resolution of this elegant solution of taking patients beyond chronic disease. And so, you know, we created this thing called the Functional Forum. We've done 54 episodes now. The last episode was last Monday. You can watch it online. And if you want to see it live, tomorrow night in Seattle, actually in the Fremont Foundry, we're doing the 3rd live event. Dr. Jeffrey Bland, the founder of functional medicine, is the keynote speaker. We've got 3 other doctors that are practicing locally in Washington State doing functional medicine. And this group is actually a function of the Functional Forum, because we created these meetup groups around the country to watch the show and get together and talk about it. And that's how this group started. So if you're not sure why you're here, it's because people like Allison and the other doctors that, you know, that set this up, you know, resonated with it, wanted to get groups of people together. The second book I want to talk to you is my book, and my book was really a guide for doctors who wanted to leave the system and come and join into the functional medicine revolution, basically a step-by-step guide on how to do it. I guess I'm like a practice management guy, right? That's kind of like how I sort of done the last thing. I created this show, I'm the host of it, I curate the clinical talent, I have no medical credentials, but I do know how to use the internet, and I've helped a lot of doctors, you know, shift from internal medicine, sports medicine, family medicine, primary care, even the specialties to functional medicine practices. And this is kind of like a guidebook on how to do that. So now everyone kind of knows who I am and what I do and the context for why we're here. And just like Allison said, look, isn't it a beautiful, warm, not too hot evening? So the gods are shining down upon us here now. So what I want to talk about today, so for the last 4 years, I ran this business called the Evolution of Medicine. And it's one of the sponsors, you can see it on the side of New Health. And you know, what we started to do last year with New Health was to start to think, the first question that we asked was, if we know that functional medicine is a better operating system for dealing with chronic disease, how do we get 100,000 doctors to do it, right? There's about 30,000 right now at a sort of a random triangulation. If we knew we needed a lot more, how did we do it? So we put all the content online for free. We built these meetup groups like this. I made a book which basically teaches you how to run the educational and marketing structure of running a direct primary care practice, or a practice that's more sustainable. And that's what we did. And the beginning of 2017, I started to ask a different question, which is, how do we deliver this type of care to a much bigger pool of people, right? Because now we've got all these individual private practices. How do we set up a structure where, like, let's say an employer with 100,000 employees, this might get real any moment here. We've got the things showing up. I don't know if there's stuff on this side, but if there is, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay. Right, I'm just going to carry on, and if we have to run, we'll run. So there's sprinklers happening for people at home. We got sprinklers. It's a melee. So we started this thing called New Health, and the goal was, how do we scale up delivery of functional medicine and make it efficient enough? And so what we saw was that in the average functional medicine practice, there are two separate things that are going on. There's helping patients execute on lifestyle behaviors, and then there's behavior change. There's behavior change is the one thing, and then there's the root cause resolution diagnostics. And ultimately, in version 1 of functional medicine, the doctor was doing both of those. But it ended up to a situation where functional medicine was sort of typically outside of the payer system and an extra cost to people on top of their insurance, leading to a thing where it could only really be accessed by a small percentage of Americans. And we tried different ways to make it cheaper, and we tried to get doctors to do things like direct primary care, where you could make it more affordable. But ultimately we realized that if we wanted to do this revolution, we needed to actualize it and start actually doing it, and start to get into the business of developing care at scale. So we set up New Health. And New Health essentially separates the role of doctor and health coach. So the health coach does the health coaching, and the provider does the root cause diagnostics. So that was where we got. And by November last year, we essentially had proved that by having the health coach, basically by putting everyone with the health coach and having the health coach execute on the behavior change, we could essentially get a much broader group of people well at a much lower cost through that combination of organizing providers in that order. Then on January the 2nd, something changed in the law, and it led us to come up with this new plan that we're here to talk about on this tour. And I'm gonna share you with what that plan is, right? So, who is familiar here? So, there's so much to say, but who is familiar with the idea of a Christian health cost sharing ministry? Have you guys ever heard of that? Okay, so just to contextualize this, in the late 80s, some churches started to essentially, like, groups of congregations in a certain area would start to pool money to be able to take care of each other in the case that someone in their audience had a significant health cost. And as it started like that in the 80s, it was unbelievably rudimentary. Like, there's a cost of $30,000. There's a cost of $30,000. There's 30,000 people in the community. Everyone's going to chip in $1, and it was literally like that basic. Then it all started by 2010. There were 100,000 people involved in these things. There were 5 major Christian ministries, and they were operating this. Some were, you had to be like in the town, in the town with a note from the pastor, and some were more liberal. Then in 2010, the ACA kicks in, right? So now these 5 Christian ministries have an exemption to the mandate. So these 5 ministries were basically, they said, if you're a member of one of these ministries, you don't have to have health insurance, and you're not going to have to pay the tax penalty. So up until 2013, I had no health insurance, right? I moved to America in 2005, and for 8 years I didn't have health insurance. One, I knew a lot of doctors, so I figured if I get any sort of issue, I'll be able to be taken care of. I was basically taking a risk that I might get hit by a car, but I wasn't making that much money. I just had my own business. I was just getting started, and I just lived without it. And I also, this is kind of like a selfish thing, I guess, but I was always like, if I get diagnosed with cancer, I'm just going to fly back to England and I'm just going to use the system over there, which is not available to all of you, but that was just the way that I thought about it in my head. And my wife and I lived, with no health insurance for 8 years. And then I had a daughter. You probably saw her crying, climbing between my legs. And suddenly it was not cool to not have insurance, right? In any sort of way to be able to do that. So I found these Christian health cost sharing ministries and I signed up, and it was amazing because I was using the care of functional integrated providers and I was paying cash for it. And rather than paying $1,500 a month for the worst health insurance, because I lived in New York, I paid $449. And basically that was there in case of catastrophic need. And ultimately I was saving $14,000 a year over commercial health insurance. And so, long story short, when that tax bill changed on January 2nd and the tax bill took away the individual mandate and the tax penalty not having insurance, it clicked in my head that the most obvious group in society to start a health cost sharing community is the functional medicine community, because 86% of health costs are driven by lifestyle driven chronic disease. And if you happen to have the secret sauce that can reverse chronic disease and can reduce the cost of chronic disease, which is where all the costs come from. And we were talking about this earlier, people think that the cost of medicine is mainly through accidents. No. The cost of medicine is mainly through people being on Humira forever, right? Where it costs $50,000 a year. That's how, cost, how many car accidents do you have to have for every person that's on Humira? And if you get on Humira, every insurance company knows that your cost trajectory goes like this. You get on Humira, and then you're in 3 years, you're going to be on 5 autoimmune drugs, and the cost of that patient is $400,000 a year, right? You know the 80-20-20 rule? This is the 95-5 rule, where 5% of cost comes from, 95% of cost comes from 5% of people. Is that kind of rule is happening in medicine, and it's the super expensive drugs that cause it. So, on the January 2nd, I said, okay, we're going to start our own health cost sharing community, and that is what New Health is. And ultimately what I'm here to do on this tour is to essentially prepare communities for the fact that this is going to happen, that on November 1st, when the open enrollment starts, there's going to be a new alternative that's never been available before. It's going to be built on the chassis of the Christian health cost sharing ministries, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. But ultimately what we're going to do is create what I hope will be the most successful structure on the planet today at controlling healthcare costs by keeping people well and getting people off drugs, and be a model for the rest of the world on how to do this, because the truth is no one else in the world knows how to do this. And that was the kind of moment of clarity that I had 5 years ago. I went to South Africa where my dad lives. My friend Tal is here from South Africa too. 10 years ago, the number one diagnosis in South Africa is TB, right? It's an infectious disease. Today, it's type 2 diabetes. So these diseases are happening all around the world in the same way, and no one knows how to deal with it. Functional medicine is just ahead of the game because America kind of invented chronic disease in a certain way with McDonald's and whatever. We just had it longer here, so we've been ahead on the solutions. It's not always a popular thing, but it's true. So why this Christian ministry structure, right? The first thing is it's way cheaper. If you've been in the medical system, you know that there's a range of prices for any procedure or any service. And as long as you're paying that highest price because you got the best insurance, you got no way in hell of controlling costs, right? The lowest cost is always the cash rate. So the reason why I think this program is going to work is because when you have people who have never been on the provider side of medicine, they're always like, oh yeah, we should do it's happening. Oh my God, that was amazing. All right, we're gonna carry on.
That's fun.
That was fun. I needed a bit.
There's adventures right there.
Here you go, James. James, we go sit on, have everybody
All
sit
right.
there.
Yeah, here we go. Come over this way, we've got some seats for you. We'll finish the presentation on the concrete seats and the Q&A segment. Hey everyone, we just had a sprinkler incident and we're actually gonna continue the conversation over here. We're gonna set up and you see the bus in the background. There's actually a good shot here. I'm glad that everyone's liking it enough that you're not leaving and that you're coming over to do it. Thank you. I know you're going to be looking into the sun, but it's not as hot as it was. So I'm gonna do about 5 more minutes of the spiel and then we'll take questions because I know that there's a ton of questions here. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Callie. Hey, Callie, go and get those green stickers. They're in that bag over there. Wasn't that exciting? What an exciting moment in the history of functional medicine. All right, so I know right now that there's a bill in Washington where it's like Medicare for all, right? And people are kind of excited about this opportunity. What I see, the doctors don't really like. Here's the thing, and this is what we talk about on the spiel tomorrow, and if you watch the live stream, we talk about it, right? Doctors prefer getting paid cash, and practitioners. Why? Because you get paid straight away. You don't have to mess with the insurance companies. You get, the overhead can be way less or whatever. Now, patients, prefer paying cash too, because the insurance is annoying, doesn't work. Like ultimately, paying cash over and above the health insurance is not ideal, but like cash works better for both patients and doctors. So who's everyone else, right? They're the only 2 people that matter in healthcare, is the patients and the doctors. Everyone else is just hanging out, on the gravy train, right? Getting paid. All the administrators and the insurance, the bullshit, like those people are irrelevant to changing health outcomes. So why are we building the system around the people that don't matter? We're not. We're going to stop that right now. So in our system, it goes like this. If you're a patient and you want to have an appointment, first of all, there's no network. You could choose whatever doctor you want. You go to that doctor, you pay the cash rate, you pay them cash at time of service, and then you submit for reimbursement. That's for a single visit, for a doctor's visit. If you have any sort of emergency or other type of thing or chronic thing that needs to happen, you call up the community and you call up your membership advisor and you're like, hey, I need to have an MRI. Can you help me find one? And guess what? We're paying people $25 an hour to look at, like, on the internet, and then we have, these Christian ministries are serving 1 million people today. So these guys have been doing this at scale for 20 years. And they know, right, that the MRI in this building is like $500 and in this building is $2,500. It's the same machine, right? What we're doing with this, the cost sharing community, is we're shifting the mindset of the community away from, let me gouge this insurance, right? If you're the person, if you think, I've been paying $1,000 a month for 5 years and I've never used it, screw it. I'm getting Botox. I deserve this Botox because I've been paying and I haven't been using it, right? That's the thinking process. The thinking process is, let's gouge the insurance companies because they're giving me a bad deal anyway. And that's why we get to a situation where we literally have $800 billion worth of waste and fraud, right? That's a quarter of the world. That's bigger than any other economy, right? $800 billion, bigger than the British economy, right? And that's just fraud in the system. In order to deal with that, we have to change the mindset from essentially we're all disconnected and interacting with individually to a sense of community responsibility, right? And one of the things that I saw when I've been in this Christian ministry for the last 5 years is it changes the mindset towards a sense of like, people with personal responsibility are now starting to think about community responsibility, right? Being a good custodian of healthcare dollars. And that is the energy. And ultimately what we're talking about here is setting up a structure where people are incentivized to help each other, right? I'll give you an example. Who's heard of Dan Buettner and the Blue Zones? You heard of that? Right, this guy Dan Buettner, he went around the world and found 5 places where people live to 100 without chronic disease. And then he came back to America and he tried to input these ideas into a community, and he chose Albert Lee, Minnesota. In the first year that they implemented these community initiatives, healthcare costs went down by 41%. That is a ridiculous decrease. Now, who benefits from that 41%? Like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Minnesota. Why do those guys benefit from the fact that the community people took action to help each other and reduce healthcare costs? Clearly, the people who should benefit from that situation is the people that actually do it, right? So, ultimately, so community is the most powerful force of healthcare cost reduction. And look, I don't need to do this crazy bus tour to make this idea work, right? I've got a lineup of 200 health celebrities, from Dave Asprey, the bulletproof coffee guy, to all these other people who have lots of email lists who are going to email all their people and say, hey, sign up for James's thing, because they're going to get paid to do it. Why would I do this? Why would I put my family through this crazy 4-month thing? It's because it's about communities. And the reason why I'm here and the reason why I couldn't say no to Allison to come down for this day is look around, right? There's a chance that the people here might be the beginning of New Health Olympia, right? And at the end of it, you might be here in a year's time thinking that if you help someone else here get off a medication, not get on a medication, we were doing, I got a group that I was hanging out with last night, group of chiropractors and my friend Mike Mutzel from High Intensity Health. They're going to be the Kirkland, Washington group. And what are they going to start doing? Community batch cooking, right? Cooking healthy to stay a healthy life is kind of time consuming, right? Why do people go to McDonald's? Because you got to drive through. You can drive through and pick up your fuel, but it's unbelievably unhealthy. So what's the biggest thing that people say when you want them to eat healthy? I don't have the time, it's annoying, I got 3 kids, I got 4 jobs, whatever. I'm here to tell you, you could cook 90% of the meals that you need for a week in an hour and a half if you do it with a group of people where you have 6 pots going, because guess what? It takes no longer to cook spaghetti bolognese with zucchini noodles for 10 people than it does for 2, right? It takes the same time to fry the onions, takes the same time to cook the sauce, so that's an example of the kind of innovation. Now, I'm not here to tell you that I'm going to come up with all the innovation myself, but what I am going to do is to set up a structure where that kind of innovation is incentivized, right? Where people are incentivized to help themselves and to help each other. So I got on a bit of a so I was saying before, if you have any cost less than $500, if you're just going to go and see your doctor, you're going to see one, you pick the doctor you want, you get the cash rate, you pay cash in terms of service, the doctor's happy, the patient's happy. One of the things that we have to reintroduce into medicine is the individual concept of value, right? Why? Everyone knows, people are, in America anyway, everyone knows how much everything costs. And you make appropriate decisions on value based on your understanding of cost and support. When you go into a doctor's office that takes insurance, neither you nor they know what anything's going to cost and guess who's going to be paid. So how do you sniff out? If you go into the cardiologist's office and you go in and they say, oh, everything's fine, and then they bill your insurance $2,200, there is no way you're going in for that appointment if you're paying first and getting reimbursed. There's no way. We have to actually put individual sense of value at the front. Why do people pay out of pocket for chiropractors? Because at a certain point, they've realized that the money they spend on the chiropractor is worth it, right? They've attached value to the chiropractic adjustment, and they've gone and paid for it because they see the value to that. Now, one of the things that's happened with functional medicine is that there's been an illusion of expense. And that illusion of expense is created by the fact that you have to pay outside of the payer system, right? You know, Humira is expensive. Lifetime dependence on medication is expensive. Spending, you know, $500 for a couple of appointments and $500 on labs that help you understand that, you know, your depression is an inflammatory process, and that if you deal with the inflammation, you can come off your lifetime of psych medication. That's not expensive. There's an illusion of expense because you're having to pay out of your pocket for something that, you know, that is not covered by health insurance. So ultimately in our system, which is called New Health and is going to be launching on November 1st, we build on the chassis of the Health Cost Sharing Ministries, which is that we act like a community. So what do? If someone get hit by a car, we take care of them. They're paid. You know, you call up, your claims person will go in there and make sure that all of the things that you need in the short term and in the long term recovery are paid, and you never have to touch the money. Paying the bills and all that is a nightmare. But for individual doctor's visits, they get the best rate. These organizations that we're partnering with get on average 60% off the bill because one, they know how to do it. It's their job. It's not everyone else's job to like argue with insurance, but it's become all of our jobs, and it's super annoying, the most annoying part of healthcare. And then the second part is that they know that there's always like secret benefits that you can get from the state and the federal that no one really knows about, so that you can claim, and they know exactly what they're doing. So it's built on that chassis, and ultimately it's the perfect combination in my mind of reducing healthcare costs, giving people the care that they want. And you know, one of the things that I've seen time and time again is that the placebo effect is an incredibly powerful force in medicine, and people will respond to the type of medicine that they believe in. And so in our system there will be, you know, actually it should have been like this in the ACA, is that there's going to be no, you know, each type of provider is valued intellectually in the same way. And, you know, you have the similar kind of structure. So in insurance, you have your premium, which is the amount you pay in every month. And you have the deductible, which is how much you have to pay to until the insurance kicked in. In health cost sharing, you have to use a different language, but it's like the monthly share amount and then the, you know, annual unshared amount. It's basically exactly the same thing. So that's the spiel. I'm here, you know, if you want to watch, you can watch all this. You can go to New Health Live, you can watch it. We'll be live tomorrow night in Seattle, in Portland on Monday. And ultimately, what I'm hoping that is achieved from this is that a few of you think, yeah, this is a good idea, James, thanks for coming. And that we set up a structure in Olympia where we have the beginnings of an awesome community, the new community, right? And I called it new because when you say new, people know. One of the things that a branding guy told me 2-3 years ago, which started this thing, he says, functional medicine has a branding problem. He says if you put any word in front of medicine that people don't understand, they automatically interpret it as not the real, right? Naturopathic, integrative, holistic. If you don't know what those words mean, the automatic assumption by the 95% of Americans who don't know what it means is not the real. He says you should call it the new medicine, and then you get to decide what it is. And as I thought about it more and more, I thought, what is it about the new medicine that's new? And I started to realize that it's about how we know each other, how we know ourselves, how we know each other, how we get to know like our uniqueness and our individuality, and and ultimately that this is something that is known, right? This is coming back to an evolutionary structure that has been part of our DNA forever, which is a foundation of community. So that's the spiel. I'll take questions. Thanks so much for being here. Pleasure to be here in Olympia. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so the first question is there a certain number of people we need? So we're looking to get 10,000 around the country. That's our goal, is to get 10,000 people. Ultimately, we don't need that, but ultimately that's the place where that's the place where the trajectory of this means that in the next 3 years we can transform healthcare. Rachel, can you get me those flyers? So I'll answer your other question. I see a couple of people who might want to go. So a couple of things I just want to say. I'm going to end this recording here in a minute, But one of the things that we're doing, I'm going to hand these out. So Rachel, can you hand these out? So in these flyers, you'll see there's a few ways that you can sort of opt in to stay in touch with what we're doing. So you'll see on there, if you're a doctor that wants to participate in this by being listed as a local functional medicine doctor, because we're putting essentially health coach and functional medicine as two new layers between patients and primary care. A pre-primary care layer designed to keep people well, right? Is that not the most obvious thing that you can ever think of? Who disagrees with that? I've never even met anyone who disagrees with that. They realize that it's totally lost in the current system. So on that flyer that just came out, you can see that there's different places to opt in. If you want to work for us as a health coach, we're going to be hiring health coaches. Everyone will have a health coach in their pocket that they can connect with that will help them execute on the fundamentals of health creation that keep people healthy. If you want to be a doctor, you can opt into that list too. And you're going to go through a vetting process basically to make sure that you're not scamming people and that your costs are reasonable. But ultimately, you could be listed and we'll push people into there. We already have a nationwide telemedicine network in every state, but ultimately we'd like to have one in every town. So that's where we're going there. The other thing that I want to say is that we're also collecting stories over this whole tour of people that have had transformational experiences with a type of medicine that would seem, incredible to other people. So we have Gerson survivors here. We have doctors. Typically, why does a doctor even go to functional medicine in a time where they probably earn less than in conventional medicine up until now? It's because they've had an experience where they now feel a moral obligation to do things differently. And if you've had that kind of story, we'd love to capture it on video. And at the end of this summer, when people in November are like, oh, what is this new health? Like, does this thing really work? They can go to #newsstory on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and see a barrage of 60-second stories that that people will say, look, this is happening all around the world, and this is happening all over America. So that's the point. I'm going to turn this off. Thanks so much for watching at home. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop this.